Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome on behalf of the Ridgefield Library. I'd like to welcome you to our artist talk today, Coming of Age, 70 over 60, which celebrates vital art-making practices of artists over 60 years of age. Artist and curator Nancy Moore has imagined and executed this exhibition of the same name at the Ridgefield Guild of Artists. I'd like to invite Nancy to come up and share how the show developed and to give introductions to our artists as we go along the way. Today we are featuring the work of Miggs, Burroughs, Julie Leff, and Ellen Schiffman. So Nancy, would you please come up?
Hi guys, thank you for coming. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope that you all get a chance to, on my tiptoes. I hope, it's like my bat mitzvah. I was like here because the rabbi forgot to put the thing on them. Anyway. Okay, so this show is called Coming of Age. Thank you, Lori, so much for the library welcoming us to be in tandem with the Ridgefield Guild of Artists, which is such a gift. The library is such an amazing resource in town, and so is the Guild. So it's just great to hold hands this way and just kind of help each other out. So I very much appreciate that. This show is called Coming of Age, 70 Artists Over 60, and the Guild approached me to curate this show and on a theme of my choosing. And this popped into my head because I work in a community of artists who are of a certain age, and we're all really producing, we are working, we are selling, we are exhibiting, and we're here. So I wanted to shine a light on us and celebrate us, and the show is really cool, so I really do hope you get a chance. Mary Harold, who is here, who is on the board of the Ridgefield Guild, Mary Pat Devine, Cindy Mullins, who is, these people are all exhibiting in the show. They are generous enough to keep the Guild open tonight after 4. So if you want to trundle over there afterwards to the Guild, no, after 4, because the show, but they'll be open after 6 too. They close usually at 4, but yeah, you're right. Thank you, Ellen. So open after 6, so hang in there with us and go over there to see the show, because they'll be there to hold down the fort while you look around. Okay, so I just wanted to very briefly introduce the show by saying that usually coming of age refers to a young person having a pivotal experience that propels them into adulthood. But this exhibit turns that reference on its head and shows that many artists, no matter their age, are continually having that pivotal experience through their art. And that there's a young and edgy mandate among a lot of curators, gallerists, and museum acquisition staff for artists to be, that artists should be young and edgy. And so we, of a certain age, often find ourselves working in a shadowy space where the very artwork for which we once received so much attention begins to go unacknowledged. And so again, shining a light. So we have 3 wonderful artists here today who are exhibiting and, who are showing their work on a very large screen, because we want to see more of their work and we want to expand what you have to see other than what's on the walls of this exhibition. I should say too, just by way of explaining this exhibit, that in addition to having their artwork, I visited everybody's studio space, just about everybody's, and it was a revelation to see where people are working, how they're working. It was an absolute privilege to see this, and then I kind of took it one step further and said, hey, can you write something? Can you write something not about the work that we're seeing on the walls, and not your resume, but how you feel about getting older as an artist? And everybody did that. So in addition to viewing the show, you'll be reading the show, and you'll be lingering and looking at the words. It just creates another dimension for the show. It just adds, there's an artist behind here. There's a human being who made this piece. So our first human being who made an incredible piece of the show called Gratitude is Miggs Burroughs, otherwise known as the mayor of Westport, Connecticut. And he is a lifelong resident, Westport resident. And so this is a word or two, or 12, about Miggs. He graduated from Staples High School and Carnegie Mellon's drama department in Pittsburgh. And after graduation, he, in his own words, ditched drama and took up art. And sales of his early pop art prints and paintings led to commissions. And in fact, at the very young age of 26, he was tapped to design a US postage stamp. And shortly after that, four covers for Time magazine during the Watergate era, including Richard Nixon's resignation cover. An Easter egg he was asked to design for the Reagan White House. I didn't know anything. I didn't know this about you, Miggs. We're breathing your air. So he was asked to design for the Reagan White House an Easter egg, and it sat on the president's desk and now resides in the Smithsonian. He's now a full-time graphic artist since 1972, designed hundreds of logos, ads, brochures, posters, and websites for commercial and nonprofit clients alike. He's an amazing website designer if you need a website. He's been named Volunteer of the Year by many local organizations. In 1985, as part of Westport's 150th birthday celebration, he was selected to design the first town flag, which continues to fly above Westport schools, municipal buildings, and parks. From 85 to 2005, Miggs produced and hosted Miggs Be on TV, a popular cable show featuring personalities as diverse as Martha Stewart, Rush Limbaugh, and Dan Rube. More recently, his arresting lenticular art, he's going to explain that, what that means, lenticular art. It's garnered awards, commissions, and a place in Westport's permanent art collection, as well as a permanent installation of 16 pieces that you really have to see in the pedestrian passageway between Parker, Harding, and Main Street in Westport. You can't miss it if you're walking down the main drag in Westport on the main street. It's an alleyway, and it's just festooned with Miggs's incredible artwork. In early 22, 30 of his lenticular pieces were permanently installed at the Burke Rehabilitation Hospital in White Plains. And today, we're lucky enough to have him right here at the Ridgefield Library. So, Miggs.
Okay, so just take a bow and go home, I guess. I want to express my gratitude for two extraordinary women who are responsible for me being here today. First one, of course, is Nancy, who chose me for this wonderful exhibit. Her amazing curating skills are evident when you go see the show. Things are hung beautifully together, and there's a great art conversation going on there. And the other woman, believe it or not, is Snow White. There's a direct correlation to Snow White and me being here now. My father, when he was in his 20s, graduated art school in Boston and drove out west and got a job with Walt Disney. They needed hundreds and hundreds of artists and animators because it was the first feature-length animation film ever made. And he was what's called an in-betweener. And the key animators would draw, paint, not drawing. These are paintings. There's no computer. Everything we sell was painted. They'd be lucky if they did 10 seconds a day or 5 seconds a day. There's 24 frames to the second. So an in-betweener did this pose, and then the 24 steps to this pose. That's 1 second. They didn't want to pay the high-end animators to do all the in-between stuff. Anyway, later when I was born, my brother and I were in the house, he would try to explain animation to us. And it was fascinating that you could take a piece of paper and hold it in your hands and make this magic happen with just 2 pieces of paper. Anybody can do it. Draw a stick figure on the corner of a piece of paper and a drawing pad, and then put one piece of paper, the next piece over it, and draw another stick figure in a different position, a bouncing ball. It only needs 2 images, and you flip it, and it's like magic. So, as an adult, I started doing these flip books. I was fascinated with animation. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't study film or animation other than what my father told me, but this is as close as I got as a flip book. I used to make flip books for holiday, instead of my holiday card. But it's me pulling things out of the top of my head. So the flip book has 100 pages, so there's 10 seconds to the, roughly 10 pages to the second. So as a graphic artist, I just felt this obsession to include, I just loved animation, and I wanted to try to do it in 2 dimensions, because I couldn't do it in 3 dimensions, and there's no marketplace for a flip book. You can't put it on a gallery wall. It's not scalable. It's just a thing you hold in your hand. So this is an example of one of how I try to integrate animation into my graphic design. The idea was celebrating 100 years of the American Red Cross, and I realized that together we can change things. So I thought of 100 little people, and I did 100 stick figures, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, they almost look like a Red Cross. So from top to bottom, the little figure morphs into a Red Cross. So that's the animation. And that one, this one was a poster I did. Westport was being gobbled up by developers, it still is, but and this organization formed, and they asked me to do a poster to convey what's happening to Westport. So again, a little animation. We're naturally inclined to look like a comic strip. We go from left to right, top to bottom. So you don't need instructions on where do I look first. It's just natural. So this is to demonstrate this monster taking chunks out of old houses in Westport. This is another art piece I did. And it's 9 clocks that are running, and you can see it starts off with a little gray silhouette of a couple, and they're dancing or hugging or something, and as the 9 segments, chapters progress, they slowly part and they're no longer together. And there's a poem behind it which says, regret for the things we did can be tempered by time, but it is regret for the things we did not do that is inconsolable. That's sweet. Thank you, divorce, for that. This was another art piece I did, which was just, again, trying to play with space in 2 dimensions, things coming at you, things going away. Doesn't have any particular meaning. It was a self-portrait I did in my pop art days. But so one day I was looking through, I don't know where I got it, but there's these little things called Winkies that used to come in Cracker Jack, maybe they still do, in Cracker Jack prizes. This is supposed to animate, it doesn't, so I'm not going to animate it, I'm not going to act it out, but it's a hula dancer, and there's 2 positions, like this and like this. So, and you move it in your hand, you can see by the size of my thumbs how tiny it is, and these are little prizes, and they're called Winkies because one of them were eyes winking at you. This was just magic. It's magic to me. To kids, and the adults, when they hold these, they're just transformed into like a kid again. It's just like they can't believe they're holding a movie in their hands, a little tiny movie. And I wanted to do, I can't get it to move, that's okay. So it flips this way and the little dancers do their dance. So I wanted to do my own, and it took a while to learn how, because they say you can't make them bigger and you can't do just one, you have to do 1 million of them to make it cost effective. Anyway, so I started off with a picture of my mother. She was in high school, 17 years old. And I took a picture of her. Obviously, I didn't take that picture because I wasn't sure. As old as I looked, I wasn't. The show isn't, over 100. So I posed her exactly the same way. And these are simulations of what this lenticular process looks like. I will show you the real one in a little bit. But it blends from one to the other. So the beauty of the young person shines through, and the beauty of the old person shines through the young person. There's no, and again, you don't hold these in your hand, these are on the wall, and when you move past them, they change. So you're kind of you're dancing with, actually with the art, in a way. You're dancing with the piece, which I think, a dance is a pretty intimate a conversation and activity, so I think it really draws people in because they control it in a way. Some people like it halfway, like, oh, look, she's half old and half young. If we could only do that. So it starts out like this. This is a quickie little primer on how lenticulars are done in a very kind of analog way. So start with 2 pictures, but it's so much harsher when it's just side by side, before and after. I mean, there's no blending. It's just. So then they're split up. This is all done digitally in very tiny, much smaller scale, but essentially each image is sliced up, and then they're recombined, and then they're folded like an accordion, if you're doing this in a paper version. And then, so I did a little, well, I don't know if it'll work from this stage, but so you can see, no, and this way it's just both those pictures. And kids can do, it's a great rainy day project for kids and adults. Any two pictures out of a magazine or your photographs. And so that's the principle of it. So I started doing other things. I love combining, telling me this was my opportunity to be a filmmaker with using just 2 frames and saving a whole lot of money from film school and production costs and catering trucks. And everything. So I live across the street from a cemetery, and this man used to come to a grave, he still does, almost every week for the last 30 years. I don't know if it's his mother, his wife, whatever. I didn't want to intrude on him, so I had a friend pose for me in the summer, supposedly paying tribute. This is called Devotion. And then 6 months later, I took another picture of her doing the same thing. So again, you walk past this on the wall and you control, it's basically a 6 month, story over 6 months. I know on the merit, everybody has some high-ho story, or that's kind of a landmark in their life, coming home from camp or breaking up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or something, and it's, or you have a drink in there. But it became, at nighttime, it just took on this whole other thing. So I did a lenticular of the hi-ho, which the owner of the hi-ho bought, and I like it because it looks like the lights are coming on when you do this, and everything lights up. But it's become so ominous, it's just the character of it changes completely at nighttime. It's just this dark, ominous, foreboding place. I had the good fortune to go on a safari 15 years ago maybe, and this woman, this Maasai woman would come and wait for the Land Rovers to go by and sell her wares, her bracelets and things hanging off her belt. And so when I went home, you go into culture shock. You just, I'm in Westport, the land of Mercedes and BMWs and whatever, and all these stores and wealth and affluence, and I wanted to portray that, and so I it was the same lady from the graveyard lady I employed her to do this, so I had her dressed in the same color scheme, and she stood on Main Street in Westport, and so this is called Sisters, and they're sisters, 12,000 miles apart. At some point, somebody said, that piece really speaks to me, and I thought, what if it could speak? Art does speak to people in many ways, emotionally and whatever, but literally, could it speak to you? And of course, you could use a voice chip and put it on the back. You have those greeting cards you open up and they talk. So that's the first thing I thought of. They'll walk by it and it'll trigger something and the thing will speak, and that just seemed too gimmicky. So I thought of, ultimately watching it on TV, I thought of sign language. So this anyone knows Mia Bentley, that's her granddaughter, Lucy, and I posed her to do the signing for Be Nice. So it's Be Nice, Be Nice. So you walk by, it doesn't matter whether it's backwards or forwards. Sign language is very economical, and it's very beautiful to watch, and it's a gesture, and it's not meant to be an award-winning portrait of a young girl. It's meant to be just a message. So then I got ambitious, and there's this poem that I like by Emily Dickinson. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. So I thought, what's the next step? I said, I'm just going to have a silent poetry reading. And I got 30 of my friends. Well, first I found a friend of mine who knows sign language helped me, because I don't know it, I know a little bit now, but I didn't know it at all then, and he helped me with how to, translate all this. So one by one, just like the one of the girl, every one of these is a lenticular of somebody signing a word. And the words, this is the one in the hospital, but the words are under here for anybody that needs to know. So it's Burke Rehabilitation Hospital like it because they're all about healing, movement, and compassion, and this is called Signs of Compassion. So, and just hopefully a diverse selection of people, ethnicities and genders and everything else is in there. So as you walk by, and you don't have to start at the top. I mean, you can just start anywhere and look at one at a time, and it doesn't matter. And it teaches sign language at the same time. So the piece in the show, you can read it from there, it's a little word, it just says gratitude. And I thought, how do I I met this woman at a gallery, and we had this conversation, and actually I'll just read this is the statement that goes with my piece. As explained to me by the woman portrayed in this piece, happiness does not result in gratitude, but it is the act of expressing gratitude that can result in happiness. Employing the lenticular medium, these animated images depict the word gratitude being spelled out one letter at a time in American Sign Language. Coming of age can only be as rewarding as the gratitude we are willing to express for the stage in our lives. So this is the piece. Now, it's going to do it one letter at a time. When you're in front of it in the gallery, when you do this, they all will change. You can't selectively, you can selectively just stare at this one and see it change. These are done in sequence on purpose just to show you what each sign was. But, so that's, she's an artist, she's a Fairfield artist, a painter, and we got in this conversation in a gallery, and the subject of gratitude, she's Polish, so we're talking about Ukraine and Poland and how grateful Ukraine is for having friends in Poland and vice versa, and we went on to gratitude, and I said, well, it's your idea, you want to pose for it? And she said, okay, so that's it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes. Oh, can I just say one thing that I forgot to say? Please stay up there. And after each artist will be taking 5 to 10 minutes of questions, and so while you're listening to these artists, be thinking of what you'd like to ask them. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hi, thanks for that. So great. I'm wondering how long gratitude took you to do.
Yeah, a lot of it is actually, this is the piece of my model, just to show you how it works. If you were walking by, it moves. If you're still, I have to move it. But basically, that's how it works. Gratitude. These take several hours to physically print. There's an optical plastic. It's laminated over this print that has the little stripes under it, much smaller than the ones I showed. And then it's mounted on a board, and there's just a sort of a mechanical, crafty process to it. But it's a few hours, and then the photo session was actually the easiest part. It was a half hour of her standing there and posing her and making sure the signs look right, and me double checking to make sure they're accurate. But yeah, it's more of a.
I just,
Okay. Sure.
So the digital, how do you do the striping?
Yeah, so there is a way to do it in Photoshop that I was taught, but it's too complicated and too time consuming. So there is a program, this weird guy in Las Vegas who has since passed on, invented this software. It's not commercially available, and 20 years ago when I started doing this and I was searching the internet, it was just one referral after another, and he said, I'll let you use my software if you promise not to make crap. He did not want me to make lenticulars for chewing gum or, Dr. Scholl's inserts or something, He said, so I gave him a sample of what I was thinking of, and he let me use it, or gave it to me, the software. It's just software that helps. It's called interlacing. So image A, like my mother young, my mother older, is interlaced, which just means they're meshed together digitally in very tiny stripes, 30 to an inch actually. And then this optical plastic, there's 30 vertical grooves to the inch, and each one acts like a little lens, thus lenticular. That's that I have, right? Yeah, Julie. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna ask you, are you working on a project now, and can you tell us about it?
I'm sorry?
Are you working on a project now, and can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's sort of closely related to this. And it's, again, this woman suggested it. She got all caught up when she saw it, and she saw it in the gallery. She wasn't there for the opening, but she saw it and was. So the next one is, it's a 3-panel piece, You Are Not Alone. And so with 3 signs for you, it's the you, not, and alone. So the lenticular would be this, or you would be, you is probably start here, and then you, and not be here, this and this, and then alone.
Are you still working in the commercial end, or have you really just moved on to this more?
And I still do ads for Dr. Schultz.
Because I found this very moving, particularly in light of the time
Yeah.
that we live in, and I thought that's.
Yeah, no, I still do websites and occasional logos, mostly for nonprofits in town. I mean, there is honestly, because of my age, there isn't that much business. I'm not like I'm turning business away. But yeah, I do have friends that, artists and authors, and usually not big company, websites or stuff, big company. Yeah, one more.
One other one. With your mom, so that was the first one that you had done, so you had to deliberately get her in that exact same position. I just was wondering how many years apart,
Oh yeah, 80 years apart. She was 17 in the young picture, and then she was 97
Wow.
in the old. So it's like I like to think of it as a movie. It takes 80. And some people have asked me, is there a picture of every year in her life in there? Your mind, and that's computed animation. There's a latent image that stays in your mind. That's how animation works. I mean, 24 images, even in a motion picture like Snow White, it would be jerky if your eye didn't retain a latent image of frame 1, and then frame 2 comes along and it blends in, and then frame 2 has a latent image, and so forth. So it's actually your optic nerves is doing a lot of the magic. Otherwise, everything would be choppy.
So it's like back to the original flip book.
Yeah, I found, right, and my own, wanting to make movies and never having, I had a Super 8 camera and make little films for my brother or something, but yeah, these are my movies, and far less expensive than the whole process.
Makes
Yeah.
so much. There's been a request that maybe we can turn the lights down so that we can see the work better. So, and we're able to see with a light up here, I think, so we don't have to turn the lights so that we can't see. Our next incredible, talented artist is Julie Leff, and she is a painter who brings a vibrant photorealistic freshness to conventional forms. She says, I paint for myself for my love of color and form, but in a way that invites others to discover the beauty I see in the world. From a young age, Julie's favorite activity was creating colorful abstract paintings and drawings. As her practice developed, through decades of diligence and training, her repertoire expanded to include florals, still lifes, and portraits, as well as abstracts. Using sable brushes, Julie uses her signature palette of rich, emotion-laden color, which she applies in the form of oil paint on canvas. Judy studied art at Yale University and the Silvermine Art Center in New Connecticut. Her artwork has appeared in countless solo and group shows in New York City and throughout Connecticut. Her work resides in international and private and public collections, including those of Barbara Walters, Dick Cavett, and Martha Rogers, Zhao Topan in China, Fairfield County Hospice House, the Yale Child Study Center, and Mirabilis Health in Ireland. Julie maintains a studio in Connecticut, where she's a member of Art Place, the artist collective of Westport and Weston Arts. And I will say that when I went to Julie's house, which is her studio, the studio's in
house, and her work is all over her house. And she is there with her husband, Charles Buthat, who's also a phenomenal artist and whose work is also in the show. You really must see it. It's a fantastic, inspired abstract artist. I zoomed in on a painting when I walked in and I said, that. So you have to go see this in the show because that is there. And along with so much else, it was just an embarrassment of riches. It was like being in a candy store. It was very hard to choose what I wanted from her. But she's going to show you a whole lot more, so here's Julie Leff.
Thank you, Nancy. I mean, no slight to Snow White, but I'm only thanking you for this opportunity. And I'm also very happy to be in the company of two wonderful other artists. Okay, let's see. I have to remember what I have to do here. Okay. So, as Nancy said in my bio, I love color and I've always loved color. From the time I was very small, my favorite thing was just to color with crayons. But I wasn't very, very good at doing realistic things, so I tended just to do abstract drawings like this one when I was 7. Or sometimes I would do two-dimensional things, had a certain stock items that I went to. The clown was one, the tree, yellow kite. Sometimes I would do flowers. I then, when I was at college, I took a drawing class, which I loved. But after college, I went on with my life, which had nothing to do with art, got married, I raised my family, and when my kids were, my oldest was about 13, she and her sister were in a talent show, and they both sang songs that they had prepared. The younger one had been at music camp all summer, though, and she'd worked on it all summer. The older one just did it in one day, and so the younger one's thing turned out better, and the older one was feeling kind of upset about it. And my then husband was talking to her and consoled her, and she was saying, well, I always wanted to study music, but I thought that was Annie's thing because she was better at it. And he said, you know, there'll always be somebody better than you at anything, but if you pursue what you really love, you will feel fulfilled. And I happened to be walking through the room as he was saying that, and a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, I've always wanted to be an artist, but I never thought I could. And I had never had that thought before, but I knew it was true, and so I decided that I should take some drawing classes, and I went to Silvermine. And in my first drawing class there, on the first day of the first class, the teacher put a bunch of things out on the table and told us all to draw them, so I started, and it was a 2-hour class. And I worked diligently for the first hour as she was going around critiquing everybody's work. And apparently I hadn't remembered that much from the college art class because this was my first drawing. And I was fairly proud of it. I thought it was okay. I had all the objects in relation to each other. And she came over after about an hour and said, well, is that line meant to be the edge of the table? And I said, yes. And she showed me how if you hold a finger up to get a true vertical, you can actually see that the angle should have been going the other way. And she's told me some other things about trying to get some more volume, sense of volume into the objects and feeling that they were actually sitting on the table. So she said, I want you to start over. And I was kind of miffed because I had worked for an hour on this. She was the teacher, so I started over and did drawing number 2. So I felt like this was actually quite a bit better than the first one, and it was probably worth staying in the class, so I stayed in the class and tried various things in that class, including this portrait of my youngest daughter. And then I went on to take another second drawing class, By the time I had finished 2 drawing classes, I was really itching to get my hands on some color. And I was looking for somebody to teach me painting. And I was lucky enough to be introduced to Charles Ray, who some of you may know, who's a wonderful painter who lives in Reading. And he agreed to take me on, and I said, but I don't know anything, I don't know which brushes, what paint, nothing. And he said, well, I'll tell you which brushes and which paint to get. And I said, then what should I paint for our first lesson? And he said, well, pick an object that you have some emotional feeling about, because that will come through in the painting. And I couldn't really think of an object that did, but I had just been to Europe the previous summer, and there was a photograph of a little lamppost that I liked, and so I chose that. And for the first couple of weeks of lessons, I worked on that, and he showed me how to, make a wash of color and look at the major shapes in the photograph and sketch them in and compare back and forth from what I had to the photograph. And by the time the painting was done, it looked just like the picture, and I sort of couldn't believe it. And I figured, well, this is just a fluke. So for the next painting, I picked another photograph from that trip of a little church on a hill, and this was the painting I did from that. And then I still thought it was a fluke, and I kept choosing other things. I did a little still life of pears, and then I did this painting of a little sculpture that I have at home. Then I decided to try something a little more ambitious, and I did these flowers. And I loved doing these because the colors were so rich, and I loved working wet into wet. And I figured that out in between lessons, and Charles came back and he was amazed that I had figured that out. And then I thought, well, what else can I try that, to push myself? And I decided to try doing a portrait. So he took a photograph of me, and I did a self-portrait. And by this point, I was starting to feel like maybe it wasn't a fluke, because I had been able to do all these things that I had tried. And so I just kept going, and I thought back to all of the things that I had tried. What I had enjoyed the most really was the flowers, because of the color. So I did a whole series of flowers, getting gradually more complex as I went. This one is really big, it's like 7 feet tall, and this one is very big too. This one was a commission. This is one of the things that Dick and Martha Cabot have. They had a home in Montauk, and Martha loves hydrangeas, and she wanted to have this installed, did have it installed on the ceiling of their living room, so that she would feel like she was looking up to the sky through the hydrangeas. So while I was doing all of these florals, in between I also would do other things, and I had my 3 kids as subjects for portraits, so I decided I would take advantage of the free labor and do portraits of them. My mother and my father. That's Charles Ray, the teacher. And then various friends commission works. Funny, when Miggs mentioned devotion, that's the title of this painting. Those three flowers are alstroemeria, which in the language of flowers stand for devotion. And those are my hands, and this was a gift to my father on his 80th birthday. And the 3 flowers represent my 3 daughters. And that was that. And these are my youngest daughter's feet at her 8th grade formal, so this painting is called the formal. These are my mother's Ridgefield on a beach vacation that we took. This one is called Self from Below. And that's my youngest daughter again, somewhat older, and portraits. This is a model who shall remain nameless. That's my husband Charles, who was also a painter, as Nancy said, and those are some of his paintings in the background. And that's another self-portrait. And you may recognize the paintings in the background as paintings. And one day when I was in my portrait phase, we were watching television and on a big screen TV, and there was a face largely on the screen, and the signal was interrupted, and got that sort of pixelated look with colors all over the place, but you could still sort of see the face, and I thought, that's really interesting, I wonder if I could do that with a portrait. So I went back to the first portrait that I had done of myself, and did it with colors in front of it, just as an experiment. And somebody saw this and liked it and commissioned me to do one of his son. So that was that series. And then my daughter got a puppy, so I did this for her. This was the second puppy. This was their older dog who had died. This is somebody else's dog. And then this is Michael Gecko, who I've always loved. And in this painting, he was having a conversation with his lady friend. They had a disagreement, and that's why the rose is on the ground there, but he's explaining himself. And then I also did some landscapes. This was an early one. Obviously in Weston. This is a later one, also from Weston. And then one day I went to a landscape show. A woman who did lots and lots of landscapes. And it was a nice show, and I thought, that looks easy. I bet I could do that. And I went home and did one in that style, which was kind of in that style, and it was kind of decent painting, but didn't look at all like me, not surprisingly. So that's just a one-off. And then in between, I was also would go back to abstracts just to play around with color. So my early abstracts looked like this, which may remind you of the one that I did when I was 7 years old. And I wanted to learn how to be freer in painting abstracts, and I had a friend who was an abstract painter, so I went to her for advice, and she said to try to get my body into, the movement of my body into my arm, into the brush on the canvas. And so I got a big canvas and put some paint out on it and took the brush and was just kind of standing like this in front of it, and then took the brush and did that, and ended up making this painting, which originally had 5 rows of those things, but I decided rows 2 and 4 were too much, so I kind of wiped them out with turpentine and left those streaks, which I kind of liked. So I decided to try that again in a different color. And in this one, the shapes, which had been sort of more eye-shaped first, became rounder, and I thought the circles were really kind of fun to work with, so I then did a number of paintings that had circles of various colors, and the grid was kind of showed softly behind them in this case, but then became more and more explicit as I worked on the paintings. The grid became a thing. So this was a very popular series, and almost all of these sold. They were in different textures and colors. This is very large. Anyway, so again, in between all of these, I didn't just go straight through, but for purposes of this presentation, it's easier to sort of do them in chunks. But in between, I also wanted to get back to flowers, but not just plain flowers. I wanted to introduce some other elements. So I thought, well, that's what a still life is. So I did this still life with the flowers, but it also had the, the silver that reflected and the lace and various other textures that were fun to play around with. And then this one also has the marble which reflects crystal. And there was this one that again had the drapery and the upholstery and marble and and then one day I was setting up a still life in my studio with flowers, and one of my abstract paintings happened to be leaning against a counter behind where I was, behind the shot. And so it became like the background, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I think I'll make it explicitly an abstract background. So these were the flowers, and I played with the background and did that, and that led me into a whole series of florals with abstract backgrounds, or still lifes with abstract backgrounds, and I used a lot of my own paintings as inspiration for the backgrounds. And this is that series. But again, after doing 6 or 7 in that series, I kind of wanted to do something different, so I took some flowers and just kind of deconstructed the still life and just put them down on a table and created that abstract thing at the top, just for visual interest. And then did another one with flowers just lying down like that. And these are much more recent ones. The last few have been pretty recent. Just explorations of color in a floral kind of way. But as usual, I wanted to keep challenging myself to do something that I hadn't done before, and that brings us to the painting that is in this show, which is this one, which is a landscape, but much more detailed and bigger than any that I had done before. I wanted to make it that big and that detailed because I wanted people to really feel as if they could walk into it. This took me about a year during the pandemic because I could only work for an hour or two a day because it was so hard to just figure out where each leaf should go, basically. So to get to the theme, and turn to the theme, for me, being over 60 as an artist just means that I've had more than 60 years to explore art and color, gaining confidence as I go. And luckily, unlike something like rock climbing, this is something I hope to be able to do for many more years.
And we have about 5 minutes for questions for Julie.
Okay. Did you work off of a photograph for this?
Yes.
Locally in Ridgefield? I'm just curious.
It was Weston. It's a street in Weston, Beaverbrook Road, which is right near our house. I took a photograph, and actually it sat in my files for quite a while, and I didn't do anything with it. And then when I was looking for my next project, I took it out, and I transferred it into the computer so that I can blow it up and really look carefully at things.
Really wonderful.
Are these watercolor, oils?
They're oils. They're all oils.
Pardon?
All oils.
Oh, magnificent. Everything you've captured.
Thank you.
Have you explored other types of art, or did you just exclusively stick with the painting, like the way you went off and tried new things with your painting? I'm just curious if all of a sudden you were like at a printmaking studio, or I don't know.
Not very much. I I did one collage, a big collage, and I've explored a little bit lately, actually. I've done a few things, snipping up paper and doing things like that, but mostly I've stuck to painting.
Beautiful.
What does that place look like now? Is it the same or has it changed?
It has changed. It's unrecognizable now. In fact, my husband and I might know the answer to this question, were you to ask him, have walked down that street and we know where the spot is and you can see it. And even in fall, you can identify the spot, but it looks nothing like this because it's all overgrown now. So it's like, I caught that moment and the sun was on and it was perfect and it was gorgeous and, you know, it's gone now. But after that,
How big did you say it is? How big is that?
it's 56 by 70 inches.
These are so beautiful. Does it feel different, other than the money, does it feel different to do a commission versus something on your own?
Yes. When you're doing a commission, you have to do it the way the person wanted it. So for example, in that commission that I showed you that for the cabinets with the hydrangeas, their living room had blue furniture in it, and Martha said, I don't want any purple in the hydrangeas, I just want blues, shades of blue, which was really hard for me because I love the periwinkle kind of color that gets into hydrangeas, but I had to stick to that, so it made it hard, it made it a real challenge. And usually it is a little bit more of a challenge when it's a commission because you have to do it the way the person wants it. You can't just do whatever you feel like doing.
Do you photograph the flowers before you paint them so that they don't fade away? while you
Yes.
paint them?
Yes, it takes me, I mean, even in smaller paintings, it takes at least a month. The flowers would never.
How about your family photos, your husband, your self-portrait, your daughters? Everything is just so beautiful. Is that from photographs? Have you done some anatomy? You know, the hands, the feet.
Thank you. No, I actually haven't studied anatomy, but I really, really learned how to look carefully and just keep looking at the photograph and I have a good eye for if something's a little bit off. And if it's off, I just keep at it until it doesn't bother me anymore. Thank you.
It's amazing the synchronicity that I'm noticing in these talks. For instance, back to Miggs talking about the Emily Dickinson poem that he projected on here, and in this very library, on your way down the stairs, when you walk into the lobby, there's a magnificent tapestry by Elena Hernmark, who also spoke on this stage. Who's a national treasure who happens to live in Ridgefield, and it's a line, and there's a poem, a line from Emily Dickinson on it, right, entering the library. And now, the question about have you ever done other media, to Julie, who, by the way, wonderful talk. Oh my God. Have to. You have to go see it. It's called October, it's incredible. We're about to hear from Ellen Schiffman, who has just dipped her toes, her hands, her whole body into so many different media, and what's the female word for master? Just become very expert and creative about exploring materials and taking risks, and I so admire her as an artist and as a human being. Ellen Schiffman's been a professional artist for close to 30 years, exhibiting her work in shows, galleries, and museums nationwide. As a self-taught artist, she often comes with unique and unfiltered solutions to artistic challenges. She's passionately committed to experimentation and exploration in creating her work, which reflects a fascination with texture, patterns, and sculptural forms. Fiber and fiber art techniques have often been at the core of what she creates. In addition to the richness, complexity, and beauty she finds she can achieve with fiber, she's drawn to the historical and multicultural richness of fiber-making traditions. She's so well-traveled and has gotten so much inspiration from all the different countries that she's traveled to and stayed in for quite long periods of time. Yet, although fiber is often her jumping off point, she considers herself a multimedia artist. In fact, she's an avid explorer of materials, many of them unconventional, such as cotton twill tape, items from nature, found objects, Q-tips, and more. Surprise and spontaneity characterize many of her pieces, and her inspiration is drawn from across cultures and time, with imagery inspired both by the randomness of nature and the intentionality and splendor of human creations. Moments of vulnerability and transition, as well as the beauty of imperfection, all interest her. While her work embodies fragility, it also speaks to the possibility of change, growth, and resilience. And she's also, in addition to being in this show, she's got more than one work in the show. Ellen is also exhibiting, one of 3 exhibitors at the Brookfield Craft Center. It's a wonderful show called Tangible Traces. It's up until April 24th, and it's really a must-see, fantastic show. Brava. And I just also wanted to say that just visiting Ellen's studio, which is heavenly, it's just really such a unique space, and it's just full of wonderfulness and being one of the objects of wonderfulness. And when I was visiting you for tea one day, it was not in the studio, but you wanted to show me things that you were just recently working on, and you brought these pieces down, and I said, again, I felt like a pointer. So, and it's like, I'll take that. So curating can be like shopping. It's like, I'll take that and that. Do you have anything in the blue? So it gets kind of crazy, but it's hard also to like stop, too much work. So there's way too much work in this show that you're going to see if you want to come over to the guild after the talk happens. But we made it all fit, and Ellen's work looks just magnificent on the wall where it is. And so without further ado, here is Ellen Shipman from Weston.
Okay, so some people asked me whether I was nervous about giving this presentation, and my answer was, I'm not nervous about talking because I've done a lot of it. I'm nervous about this machine and making, no, I think I'm, oh yeah, you guys just, it's like the PowerPoint, it's the technology that gets me.
Right, let's close this one first.
The machine, the technology. See, I wasn't counting on Julie still being here. I think
That's you. Okay.
Okay. So, first of all, I just want to say those were 2 great presentations, Miggs and Julie. And, you know, one of the wonderful things about this show is that Nancy really selected in I mean, we're all in a similar age bracket, but beyond that, we're all very different. And the beauty of the show is that it really brings together such a diversity of talent and such a diversity of medium and such a, you know, and you're seeing that here. I mean, Miggs's work is just brilliant and fascinating and very moving, the messages that you're you know, conveying. And Julie's is just beautiful, you know, it's just one beautiful image after another. So, you know, I really do recommend that you go to the show. You're going to be blown away by the range of work that's there. So, let me start. How come it's not coming up? It's on the screen.
Then you have to go up to slideshow.
Oh.
And then you go to
I told you this was the fourth
So
thing.
now if you just press
Okay.
that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm all set. I think now I just have to push one button and I can keep going. So just, you know, this slideshow, I tried to make that my journey. It really has been a journey. It continues to be a journey. And that's one of the beauties about being an older artist is you can look back and see the many chapters and look ahead, many more chapters, hopefully. You know, my journey didn't start in the same way that a lot of artists that I talked to, you know, were exposed to art from a young age. They studied art when they were young, or they studied art in college, or, you know. I grew up in New York City, which is a pretty artistic place, but I think I can count on one hand the number of times that my family ever went to an art museum. My family was cultured, and, you know, but we went to the Museum of Natural History a lot more than we ever went to art museums. And so, you know, I always had a fascination with art, but I really did not have the exposure growing up. And so when I look back at, you know, when I was very young, there were really two things that I remember that sort of indicated that there was something very exciting to me about art. One was that in first grade, I identified the little girl in my class who was the best drawer. She could make animals that looked like animals, and that was truly fascinating to me. I mean, I still can't make a person look like a person. It always looks like a stick figure. So I targeted this poor little girl and made her my best friend. And her name was Rita, and she was amazing. And so that was, you know, just an early indication of my fascination with art. And then the other, which I'll show you in the first slide, came with my grandmother, who of everyone in my family was the most artistic, and she was not, you know, she was a doodler. You know, she would make little drawings and doodle, and, you know, I really like that. And we would spend a lot of time in Central Park having picnics. And so we had a picnic with my grandmother, and after we were done, we took all of the aluminum foil and the forks and the napkins and the raisins and all the schmutz from the picnic, and we made it into a doll. And that was a revelation to me, that you could take materials that were one thing and repurpose them into something that was very magical. And as you'll see, I have continued to do that as an artist, you know, to the current day. So those were early inklings that there would even be an artistic journey. But, you know, there were many years that I didn't really do anything. I didn't study art in college. I didn't study it when I got my master's. I was, you know, really off in other things. In the early years of, in my early years, I was really just a dabbler. So my first love was with making quilts, which, you know, I know that there are some other fiber artists here, and I think a lot of us had at least touched on quilts at some point in our career. I made quilts. I wasn't doing it professionally, but I was working as a bartender so that I could support myself to do the quilts, which was really what I loved. And I worked with wood, and I did a number of things. I worked for many years with botanical material. I would preserve the botanical material and make them into collages. But it wasn't really until I was quite a bit older that I actually started making work, showing it to people, and getting a reaction from people. And the first material, well, actually not the first material, but the first material I'm going to show you is when I started making felt. And felt, you probably know, like the square felt pieces that you can buy at Michael's or Cowlor's, or which doesn't exist anymore, but anyhow. But the felt that I was making was starting from wool roving. And it was a process of bringing the roving together and making artwork. And the way that a lot of the things that I've tried are very serendipitous. So the way that got born for me is I was doing some collages with plant material, and I was showing them and selling them, and was really in love with that medium. And then a friend of mine came over, her mother's a weaver, and she said, my mother just started making felted scarves, and I brought them to show you because I know you like fiber. I looked at these scarves. To me at the time, they were the most gorgeous things I had ever seen. I bought 3 of them on the spot because I could not live without any of them, and I couldn't decide on which one I wanted. And she said, I can teach you felting. I can, you know, my mother taught me it's really easy. I can teach you felting. she came over the next weekend, we had a bottle of wine and a pizza, and she showed me how to felt. And the following Monday, I dropped what I was doing, which is something that I do, and she told me where to get all the felting supplies, and I started felting. This is a series of scarves that I made. I probably made, hundreds of them in the course of my felting days. This sort of harkens back to my quilts, but that's flat, two-dimensional felting that I did. I was sort of, with the felting, you're like painting, but you're painting with wool. You're not painting with paint. I never saw myself as a painter. I was painting with wool. And then I got very dimensional with the felting pieces. And that's a whole series that I did called a rock series. A lot of my work, really has references to nature. As Nancy said, there's also a lot of imperfection and just a lot of fragmentation and all sorts of things. But this was a whole series I did. And after I had been felting for some time, I realized that I had, and quilting and working in wood, I realized that I just had a lot of ideas of things that I wanted to do with fiber. At that point, I really think I considered myself a fiber artist. But I just didn't have the time to do them because I was getting ready for shows. I was, supplying quite a few stores with my felted scarves. And so I decided that I would take a year. It was a big birthday year for me. And I decided that I would take a year and every week make a different piece in a shadow box, a small 9x9 shadow box, that either explored a different material that I was interested in exploring or a different technique that I was interested in, and I did it. I mean, I did 52 boxes, and this is that series which I call the 52 box project, and each one was done during a different week, and they are exploring many different, like I said, many different materials, many different techniques. I had a notebook with a list of all the things I wanted to try, and I probably had 200 ideas in there, but every week I would say, I'm gonna look at my list and focus on one thing. Here's a close-up of just a few of them. The one on the top is made of hardware from the hardware store and fiber. The one on the right is made with recycled sari silk from saris. The one here on the bottom was delivered to me in a big plastic bag by a friend of mine whose husband made photo albums, and so she gave me a huge bag of leather, and so I wove the leather, and then the one on the right has acorns in it. Again, a lot. I do a lot of work with nature. There were two pieces in that series that really set my work in a certain direction for a number of years, and that's these two. These two are the first sculpture that I did with Q-tips. You'll see more of those. And the bottom is cotton twill tape. And both of those, and many of the other boxes, actually, I would say that since I did that 52 boxes, most of my work has somehow grown out of that series. I mean, there were so many things that I tried that year that I wanted to go deeper. But these two in particular, I did go deeper with. This is a pretty big piece, about 32 by 32, and it's a Q-tip sculpture, with shredded board and cheesecloth. And this one is the same size. I call it the Majesty of the Slow White Crawl. And these two pieces were also done at a time that my husband and I were taking sort of a bucket trip list to Patagonia. And so, while I was inspired by the Q-tips, I was also inspired by the landscape that we were visiting. I don't do any work that's really representational, but the masses of the glaciers and the snow and the vastness and the power of nature was very much part of what we were seeing during that trip and found its way into my work. And I'm just showing you like a couple of pieces from different series, but there's lots and lots of explorations of Q-tips as a medium. And if you want to find the best price on Q-tips, because I buy them by the case, you know, and you know, I don't even remember how I started. Well, I started in that 52 boxes, but I don't know how that particular idea came onto the list, but it did, and it really grew into something big. The next series that I'm going to show you that also came from the boxes is the cotton twill tape. And I buy the cotton twill tape in these big rolls in different widths. And it's a pretty mundane material, and it's pretty cheap. I mean, I like material, you know, working with materials that are pretty cheap. I'd love to work with gold leaf and whatnot, but it's not cheap. So a lot of what you see is very cheap. And this particular series with the twill tape I call Singular Stories from a Sizable School. And it's my challenge to myself to find as many ways to use a single material in different ways. And so it's an ongoing project. You know, they sell, I make more, and you know, I'm still coming up with different ideas on how to use the twill tape. I mean, I braid it, I shred it, I cut it, I fold it, I sew it, I do all sorts of things, and that's what this is. Another series that I've done with the quill tape I call my Fragment series, and these pieces are very inspired by antiquities. They're inspired by Mughal architecture. They're inspired by the white of the Taj Mahal, which we had visited at that time. They're inspired by lace around the world and work of women. So, but there's a lot of fragmentation. I'll tell you, all the white work, interestingly enough, I spent about 5 or 6 years just working in white, even though I am also really a color person and I've done a lot with color. But there was an election not far back that really was very disturbing to me, and I needed to find a place of calm, quiet. And for many years, I just worked in white. I couldn't bring color into my work at all. And so that was also happening with these white pieces. At the same time that I was really fascinated with exploring, and I found white, like, you know, the sculptural possibilities. You know, when you're working in color, that's a whole other dimension. But when you're working with white, it was just about the colors, the shadows and the forms and the patterns, and that really captivated me for quite a while. This is just a shot from one of my shows of several of those fragments pieces that I showed you. What's next? Oh, this was another one of the boxes that really informed my work for a while. As a fiber artist, I love to stitch, but I didn't really do a lot of pieces just with stitching. It would sometimes come up in my pieces, but I didn't really do a lot. And so that piece from the box series that on the top is made entirely of French knots, which is, those of you that do fiber, you probably know what a French knot is. Those of you that don't, it's just a delightful, very meditative stitch that is one of my favorites. And sometime after the box series, I had a very bad ankle break, and I needed surgery and had several rods put in my leg, and I was told that I needed to stay off no weight bearing for 4 months. And so in the beginning of that, I just kind of went up to my studio, bounced up on my butt, because that was the only way I could get there. And I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I had been working on some of those other larger pieces that I showed you, and I couldn't get up to work on them anymore. So what I did is, the fiber that was around was ace bandages. They were all over the place at that point. And I started stitching into an ace bandage, a 6-foot ace bandage. And it wasn't really meant to be a piece, it was a meditation. It was like a oh my God, I'm going to that dark place, I'm getting depressed, and I can't, you know, if you're an artist and you, I don't know, for me, I have to be working. And so the thought of not working really was upsetting to me. And that's that. It actually became a piece. That's the piece in my home. I spent months just putting French knots in an ace bandage, and I call it Diary of a Break. And that's, that and the 52 boxes are both sort of diary pieces for me that are, will never be for sale, and they just speak about a particular moment in my life. Once I was done with this piece and I could get around a little, I realized that ace bandages were a wonderful medium for sculpting, and so there was born a series of sculptural ace bandage pieces. But these I really did need to use and it needed to wait till my ankle healed a little bit. Okay, so then we have the pandemic, and you know, like many other artists, I had, you know, my whole fall lined up. There were shows coming. There were, you know, of course, everything got canceled, and work that had been out came back, and we didn't know how long it was going to be before we'd start showing again. I mean, I chose not. A lot of artists did show online. You know, there were online exhibits. I chose not to do it, and so I said, okay, so what do I do now? Do I just make more Q-tip pieces and more, you know, more felt and more of all of the stuff? Or do I take this opportunity to learn something that I've always wanted to learn? And I ladder, and I had always wanted to learn how to make books. And I had a lot of like mark making things that I had done, and lots of suminagashi, which is a type of Asian marbling, and I just experiment with a lot of things. So I had a lot of, I've been doing a lot of photography. I had a lot of images that I felt could go in books. And so, you know, I'm sure you all know that in this moment, you can learn anything online. And so, you know, a combination of books, I learned better by watching someone do it. So I just took a bunch of not even classes, like videos online, and I taught myself bookmaking. This was a beginning shot. I probably made close to 200 books during the pandemic, learned a lot of different styles of bookmaking, and it really nourished me a lot during the pandemic. This is a group of eco-printed books. That was another pandemic activity that I did, where you take plant material and through a process of treating the plant material and then boiling or steaming, blah, blah, blah. It's a whole long process, but you get imprints of the plants on paper. And I had done a lot of that, and so a lot of those, and this is a series of eco-printed books that I did. This is what is called an explosion book, which is a book that you open up and it explodes out. And that's 2 out of 200. Anyway, I got pretty obsessed. Another thing that I did during the pandemic, because I love the bookmaking, but I had never been a painter. And, you know, as an artist, it was something that really scared me a little bit, you know. I think it brought me back to, you know, my younger days when Rita was the artist and I was, you know, not the artist. So I took a summer-long painting class. And when you take a new anything, it's challenging, and it brings you back to like your most awkward moments with your last medium. And so I think the first day I did the painting course, I had a big jar of gesso, which is just really like white paint. And I must have tripped or something, and the gesso went all over my studio. That was challenge number 1. Challenge number 2 is I always had a teacup, because I'm always drinking tea. The paintbrush always ended up in the teacup. So it was really challenging to learn not to do that. But I persevered, and it was paint on paper. It was really just, for me, getting back to color, because I had been away from that for a while. The books and the painting got me back into color. It was color mixing, which I had never done, which was really fun. I had done it with fiber, but I had never done it. And it was just shapes and, you know, putting paper, which was fun. And, you know, I accumulated a huge pile of page on paper. There were none that I really liked as a painting. So I started cutting them up, because there were parts of it, like, oh, I like that little moment, you know. I started cutting them up, and I started making collages. And that's what that is. It's just a collage of, you know, some of the paintings that I was doing at the time. That's a much bigger one. And these were the pieces that I brought out when Nancy came, not the big ones, but the little ones. I had a whole series of the little collages, and I was really just showing them to her because she's my friend, and she was over, and we always show each other work. I wasn't like showing her for the show, and she immediately said, I will take that. And I really thank her for supporting me in that journey, because this is the latest chapter in the journey. Like, I'm not saying that any of the other chapters get closed, but just new things get added in, and every time you add something in, like I say, it's a new beginning. You're nervous. You don't know if anyone's going to like it. You don't even know if you like it yet, you know, but you're just playing. And so it was at that moment of playing that I showed Nancy my first 6 pieces. She said, I want them for the show. So I thank you for that. And, you know, so they're being shown at the Guild for the first time. And here I am with the series of 3 that she took at the show. And the yours continues.
So I just wanted to say that there are at least 2 warehouses in this country that think Alan is a prominent doctor. Between the Q-tips and the ACE. She's going.
And the second thing was the synchronicity again. Did anyone notice with the accordion book, when Miggs held up that, and then Julie with the portraits with the lines through them, it just made me think of how we're all
We're so different, but we're still,
yeah, it's so interesting.
Okay, questions. Questions for Ellen? Don't let me take up all.
What happened to Rita?
I have no idea. Rita was with me for 1 year. I have no idea. I imagine she's probably in MoMA or now, but I don't know. I don't even remember her last name. She was just a miraculous child and a model, someone who I held up all these years. I don't think she remembers me at all.
She's in MoMA.
Any more questions?
It's sort of a comment and a question, I suppose. One of the things that I enjoyed most about the show, which I saw before I came over here, and I would have to spend hours reading those beautiful things that you guys wrote next to your pieces. I was very, very moved by it, and actually I spoke to Patty, who will be speaking to you, about can't we have some kind of online something, or, I mean, I would buy a printed catalog of all of this, but I know that's an expense to go through. But I think you being last of this group was so interesting to me, because your journey is so touching. It's so, I can't explain how I relate to it so closely. And I'm not a working artist, but I work with young children in art. I was an art teacher, actually. And my journey with the children was, I get more from them, I think, than I ever gave them, because they are so, and there's something about you, that vulnerability of being that child that looked at Rita, and like, I can't be Rita. Well, I guarantee Rita's in an accounting thing. But anyway, I just wanted to thank all of you for being so vulnerable to us and expressing those thoughts that you did, and for these beautiful presentations. That's not really a question there.
Thank you for your observations and comment. It means a lot.
Do you exhibit at Brown Grotto?
No,
No,
I don't.
you should.
You know, I would love to. If you would tell Tom that next time you
No,
talk to
no,
him. He tends towards people that live far away,
Yeah.
you know. But I admire what, you know, his work is beautiful, and I thank you for saying that. That means a lot, but I don't know that he's on the same wavelength.
Just to piggyback the words a little bit, I also, it's the wisdom that I got from these meetings of being similar age and just the power of that, that way in which you just projected all of your emotions, all of your good and bad experiences, and out of this, you continue to take risks and explore, and it's just so moving and equal to. And you are a painter. You're exactly. Hey, I'm looking at all these little images in it. I'm like, oh, I have to take that. Yeah. Wow.
I'm enjoying it, yeah. Well, you know, the writing, you know, that you're, I mean, at the opening, I know I didn't get to read anything, I barely saw any art because I was so busy talking. But it's really Nancy's vision. I mean, this is probably my 4th show that I've been in that Nancy has curated, and she makes us write all the time. And, you know, as the persons who have to do that, you kind of go, oh, can't I use the writing I did for her last show for this show? But no, it's always, but it pushes you to really reflect in a way that you wouldn't. And I have found the writings for her other shows really powerful as well. Like I say, I have to go back to this show and do a lot of reading, you know, for this show. But I think, you know, there are galleries now that don't even put your name next to the piece. They don't put the materials, they don't put any information at all. Whereas Nancy, you know, has a different approach. And I think it does really add, you know, something, a dimension to the work that you don't get just looking at it. Yeah.
This is really for Nancy, but how much longer will the show be on? I can't make it now. And I'm wondering if it'll be open, what the hours and days, or it's not daily.
Thank you for asking. It is up till Mother's Day, May 8th is the last day. The gallery is closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, but it's open from 12 to 4 from Wednesdays through Sundays.
Thanks.
And Nancy, tell about the artists, you'll meet the artist day.
And, thank you. May 6th, there's a bash that we're having at the Guild, and it's Meet the Artist.
All 70 of them.
Yeah. It's Meet the Artist night, so there will be food and drink, and it's just the artists will be wearing their name tags. It's not an artist talk, it's just come and celebrate with us, and it's another chance to look at the art, it's another chance to celebrate the artists, and just tell friends, and just come on over, because it's going to be wonderful. There's a tent, there's an outdoor component, we're trying to be as COVID safe as we can possibly be, and it's been working so far, so yeah, we're trying to make opportunities to get flow through the gallery, and from all reports, this show has had a lot of nice flow through it, so it hasn't been empty in there. It's really been great. So
It's a great show. Don't expect to read a lot of the statements on Artist Night, though.
No, that's why I love this.
It's like, you gotta go
Yeah.
to that
Oh my
show,
God,
but there's no one
we'll
there.
talk.
It's
I actually took a whole other level of work to do that.
Well,
Yeah.
both,
Yeah, yeah.
But, yeah, it's so been great.
Thank you. It is 5:30, which is, you know, we all turn into pumpkins. If you want to go back there and have some popcorn and seltzer and other unhealthful things, you can go for it. And come on over to the Guild and enjoy the show. Thank you.